Hi there. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where the truth has a nasty habit of showing up right on time. Let's jump right in. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She just froze halfway up the driveway, one hand gripping her sleek little suitcase and the other trembling with her phone still clutched in it. Her expression dropped from carefree to confused, and then to pure horror. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. Birds chirping, wind brushing through the trees. Peaceful. Too peaceful. Almost like the calm before the moment someone's entire life begins to crack open. There it was, taped across the garage in big, blocky letters. Conference? Try again. Next to it, a blown-up photo. Grainy. Zoomed in. But undeniably her. Not from Denver. Not from a hotel lobby. From a rooftop bar in Lincoln, Nebraska. Snuggled up to a man with a beard she once told me she couldn't stand. I didn't yell. I didn't explode. I didn't even come outside. Because the truth? I already did my grieving. That started 72 hours earlier, right after I got a ping from our security camera alert. Front door activity detected. And just like that, a routine work trip became the spark that burned down whatever was left of my marriage. She had forgotten one small detail. The security system logs faces, even if they don't enter the house. And while I was feeding the cat Thursday evening, a very familiar car showed up on our porch. It wasn't a Lyft. It wasn't a taxi. It was a 2011 silver Acura. And the man who stepped out was definitely not her coworker. She hugged him like he was a warm blanket in winter, kissed him like she was 23 again. Then she grabbed her overnight bag and they drove off. No conference badge, no suitcase, no laptop. I stood there in the hallway, holding Oliver's food dish in one hand and my phone in the other, watching it all go down in pixelated betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't rage. I just watched the video on loop until the sun came up. And that's when I decided she'd come home to something different. So I printed the picture, booked a hotel for myself, changed the locks, transferred my money to a solo account, and I left behind everything she needed to understand, without saying a word. And now, she's standing in the driveway, trembling in her boots, staring at the wreckage of the double life she thought she had under control. The best part? This isn't even the worst of it. She came back from her conference all smiles, until the driveway greeted her with the truth. She didn't go inside right away. She stood there for almost 5 full minutes, shifting her weight, looking down the street, probably hoping it was some sick prank. Maybe a neighbor's kid. Maybe Photoshop. But I know Eloise, or at least, I thought I did. And in that moment, I watched every layer of her confidence start to peel off like wet paint in the sun. The trench coat she was so proud of, the sharp heels, the neat hair, none of it helped her now. The driveway had turned into a crime scene, and all the evidence pointed straight to her. I was parked 2 houses down in my buddy Theo's garage. Watching through the crack of a lifted door, I felt more like a stranger spying on his own life than a man taking control of it. Still, I had to see it with my own eyes, not just the panic, but the realization. That snap, when the house of cards collapses and the one who built it realizes they were standing in a wind tunnel the whole time. Eventually, she moved, picked up the paper, read the bold words again, probably hoping they would rearrange themselves into something innocent. But they didn't. They stayed right there. Conference? Try again. She opened her phone. I knew what she'd try. I'd already canceled my number on the family plan and switched to a burner. Not for drama. For space. For quiet. For once, I didn't want to be the one chasing explanations or begging for honesty that should have been there in the first place. Then she reached the door and tried to unlock it. That's when the second gut punch hit her. The code had been changed. The deadbolt didn't budge. Her own key? Useless. I had replaced every lock on Friday morning while she was sipping wine on some rooftop with him, and I left her one single instruction taped across the doorknob. Not your home anymore. Check your email. She looked like she was about to collapse. Now, to be clear, I didn't do any of this to be cruel. If you're picturing some bitter man foaming at the mouth, that's not me. I'm not the smash her stuff and go viral kind of guy. I'm the kind who does the dishes even when he's heartbroken. who folds the laundry while his wife kisses someone else 2 states away. But there's a moment when pain and clarity meet. And that moment rewires you. In the email she opened, still standing on the front steps with trembling fingers, she found a detailed message I had written at 3 a.m. the night before. No yelling, no insults, just the truth. Screenshots, timeline, travel logs, her own words from texts I'd found on our synced desktop. And at the end, I wrote the only thing I really needed her to hear. I loved you enough to never imagine this. You loved me just enough to hide it poorly. She sat down on the porch like someone had cut the strings out of her spine. And she didn't move for a long, long time. But here's the thing. That was only the outside of the house. She hadn't even seen what was waiting for her inside yet. The one thing I left behind that would finally destroy the illusion she tried so hard to maintain. And that's where the story really begins. She came back from her conference all smiles, until the driveway greeted her with the truth. I know what some people are probably thinking, that maybe I went too far, maybe I should have just sat her down and had the hard conversation. But how do you sit across from someone you've built your life around and say, "Hey, I know everything," without watching their eyes scramble for the nearest lie? How do you ask for honesty when you already know it doesn't live there anymore? The thing is, Eloise was never a good liar. She just thought I was too soft to notice. She mistook silence for ignorance. She thought because I didn't fight back in arguments, because I'd rather defuse than escalate, that I wouldn't pick up on the small things. The changes in her voice, the staggered business trips, the laughter that never reached her eyes when she told me she loved me. But I noticed all of it. I just chose not to see it until it screamed. When I left the house Sunday morning, I left behind more than a locked door and an email. I left behind a flash drive. I placed it neatly on the kitchen table, next to the photo album from our 10th anniversary trip to Maine. That album was dusty, untouched for years, but it was her favorite once. I wanted to remind her who we were before she let that version of us rot in the attic. The flash drive wasn't labeled, but it didn't need to be. She'd find it the moment she got back inside, and I knew she would eventually. Despite the locks, I hadn't barred her from the property. I left a legal path. I had emailed her lawyer with the new code and a warning that it was one-time access only. She'd get in. She just wouldn't recognize the place anymore. The house didn't look like it did when she left. All her framed photos? Gone. Her shoes lined up in the hallway? Boxed. Her side of the closet? Empty hangers and a folded letter. I didn't scream. I didn't trash anything. I just removed her. That flash drive though, that was where the real gut punch waited. I'd hired someone, a guy I knew from college who now worked in tech security. For weeks, he'd been quietly collecting digital trails. Not to spy, not to blackmail, just to know. Her texts, her second email account, the Airbnb confirmations, even a voice memo she sent to him, giggling about how she felt like a teenager sneaking around behind the parents' backs. Except in this story, I was the parent. And the joke was on me. The flash drive contained everything. Organized folders, labeled screenshots, a timeline stretching back 8 months. I didn't even go back that far originally. I thought it had only been a few weeks, maybe a month. But no. She started seeing him before our last anniversary dinner. The one where she said, "You're still my best friend." While I gave her a bracelet and she gave me a cheap cologne bottle that smelled like hotel soap, she thought she was careful, changing names in her contacts, using encrypted apps. But she forgot about cloud backups. She forgot that trust isn't just blind. It's also very, very quiet when it breaks. By the time she sat down to go through that drive, and I know she did because her lawyer called me the next morning in shock, she must have realized just how thoroughly the mask had cracked. And I didn't do it with fire. I did it with the one thing she never thought I had. Evidence and a spine. But I wasn't done. I also left her something else. Something she couldn't delete or deny. It was waiting in the bedroom. The one space that used to feel like ours. And when she saw what I'd placed on the bed, folded neatly beside her untouched pillow, let's just say the last bit of illusion shattered completely. She came back from her conference all smiles, until the driveway greeted her with the truth. There's a strange calm that follows heartbreak. Not peace, exactly, but a kind of eerie stillness, like the air after a storm has torn everything apart and all that's left is silence. That's what I felt the morning I walked out of our house for the last time as her husband. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just hollow. Like someone had scooped the middle out of me and left a smile-shaped shell walking around in my clothes. But I still had one final message to leave her. One that didn't involve words or files or digital trails. Something personal. Something she'd feel, even if she'd never admit it. So before I left, I went upstairs, to the room that used to be ours, before it turned into a museum of dead intimacy, and I laid it all out. On the bed, I placed 3 items, each carefully chosen, each symbolizing something she had taken for granted. First was the wedding photo she always kept on her side of the dresser. The one from our backyard ceremony where she wore that wildflower crown and I had no idea how nervous I looked. I didn't destroy it. I didn't even frame it. I just set it face down on her pillow. A silent metaphor. She flipped our marriage upside down, so I did the same to the memory of it. Next to it, I placed the bracelet I had given her on our last anniversary. I had found it buried in a junk drawer behind expired coupons and an old grocery list. I remember saving for weeks to buy that bracelet. I'd even had it engraved. She never noticed. I left it open so the inscription was visible. Still choosing you. Those 3 words felt like a bad joke now, but I wanted her to see them, to remember what loyalty looked like, even if she'd never earned it. And finally, the 3rd item, a letter. Handwritten. No accusations. No dramatics. Just the truth in my own shaky handwriting. I told her I knew everything. That I wasn't surprised, just tired. That I hoped she got whatever it was she had been chasing because it sure as hell wasn't me anymore. And at the bottom of the page, I wrote the one thing I had never said out loud during all those years of wondering if she was slipping away. You lost me before I ever knew I had the right to leave. I folded the letter and tucked it under her pillow. I didn't need to see her read it. That wasn't the point. The point was for her to know that the man she thought would always forgive, the man she believed would wait forever, was already gone. As I locked the door behind me that day, I looked back one last time. The house felt smaller, colder, like it had already started erasing us. I didn't take much. Just my laptop, a suitcase, and Oliver, our cat, who never really liked her anyway. Funny how pets can tell who's lying even when we can't. Later that night, Theo texted me. He said she had come back. Said she stood in the hallway for nearly an hour, just staring at the closed bedroom door, like it might somehow let her back into a life that no longer existed. I pictured her opening it, seeing those 3 objects on the bed, the photo, the bracelet, the letter, and realizing this wasn't just a punishment. It was the truth, laid out like evidence at a trial she never expected to face. But what she didn't know yet, what she couldn't know, was that someone else had already read the letter too. Because I wasn't the only one who'd been betrayed. And the next piece of this story, it wasn't mine to tell alone. She came back from her conference all smiles, until the driveway greeted her with the truth. You ever have one of those moments where everything you thought was separate suddenly snaps together into one terrifying, perfect picture? I had mine on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks before Eloise's conference. I was getting ready to take the trash out when a call came through from an unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something, gut instinct, fate, divine cruelty, who knows, made me pick up. The voice on the other end was calm. Female. Shaky, but composed. She said, "Curtis, I don't think we've met. My name is Miranda. I'm Gavin's wife." I didn't say a word. I just stood there in my kitchen, holding a dripping trash bag, my knuckles whitening around the plastic handles. She continued, "I debated calling you for weeks, but I figured you deserved to know what I know. Our spouses have been seeing each other. I have proof, and if you'll let me, I want to show it to you." That name, Gavin. I'd seen it before, once on a message preview Eloise had swiped away faster than usual. I assumed it was a colleague. I assumed a lot of things back then, but the moment Miranda said it out loud, everything clicked into place. We met that afternoon at a park halfway between our neighborhoods. Public space. neutral ground. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe accusations. Maybe blame. Instead, she greeted me with a soft, exhausted smile and handed me a brown envelope, thick with printed emails, screenshots, even a photo of Eloise and Gavin at a bar 2 towns over. Not a fancy hotel in another city, but a place 20 minutes from home. They didn't even bother to hide it. She wasn't angry. Not visibly. She was numb like me, worn out from pretending not to know, worn out from forgiving before anything had even been admitted. And then, as we sat across from each other on a cold metal bench, she said something that stuck with me like a splinter under the skin. I think they counted on us never talking. They counted on us being too embarrassed to ask questions. And she was right. Affairs don't just rely on lies, they rely on silence. On 2 people keeping their pain to themselves, afraid of looking stupid, afraid of what they'll find if they dig too deep. But we weren't silent anymore. We made a plan. Not revenge, that's messy, and it makes you just as broken as the ones who betrayed you. No, we wanted reality. Truth served cold. She had already kicked Gavin out. He was sleeping in his brother's basement. She had started the paperwork. What I did next was my own version of that. What Eloise didn't know when she walked back into our house was that Miranda had been there first. She'd helped me take down every trace of Eloise's illusion. She helped move boxes, helped me pack the bedroom, even left a note on the kitchen counter that read, "You didn't just cheat on your husband. You cheated on a woman who would have pitied you until now." But Miranda had also left one more surprise. A little twist of poetic justice I never would have had the guts to pull off on my own. She had forwarded every piece of evidence to Eloise's employer. Not to be vindictive, but because the affair violated the company's ethics agreement. Gavin was in a leadership position. Eloise was on his team. It wasn't just personal betrayal. It was professional misconduct. And Eloise had always bragged about her spotless record, about being up for promotion, about how reputation is everything. Well, not anymore. That's why, when Eloise found her way upstairs and read my letter, it was only the beginning of her collapse, because her phone started ringing. Again, and again, and again, from numbers tied to her office, from the HR line, from Gavin. I can only imagine what it was like for her. Sitting in the ruins of her double life, surrounded by receipts she never thought anyone would collect, while the consequences came knocking from all sides at once. And as for me, I was finally somewhere she couldn't reach. A rented cabin 2 hours away, just me and Oliver. No sound but the wind, the trees, and a calm that felt earned. But this story wasn't done. Not yet, because 2 days later, Eloise showed up, and what she brought with her changed everything. She came back from her conference all smiles, until the driveway greeted her with the truth. I was chopping wood behind the cabin when I heard tires on gravel. The crunch was slow, cautious, like whoever was inside wasn't sure if they should be there. I stood still for a second, axe still in my hands, heart suddenly pounding. Not from fear, but from that sickening anticipation that creeps in when you already know who it is. I walked around the side of the cabin just in time to see her step out. Eloise. She was wearing the same trench coat from before, but it didn't look crisp anymore. Her hair was pulled back sloppily, and she wasn't wearing makeup, which was rare for her. She looked small, uncertain. She didn't move toward me right away. She stood by the car, like she needed permission to come closer. I didn't give it. Instead, I leaned against the porch railing and said the only word I could manage without throwing up. "Why?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. Then slowly, she stepped forward, carrying something in both hands. At first I thought it was a folder or a box, but as she got closer, I realized it was a shoebox. An old one, the kind you keep in the back of a closet, filled with things you can't let go of but also can't explain. She held it like it weighed more than it should. I needed you to see this," she said quietly. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, waiting for the next act of whatever drama she thought this was. She opened the box and began pulling things out, one by one, laying them gently on the porch railing between us like offerings at an altar. A dried rose from our second anniversary dinner. A scribbled note I'd left her during our first month in the house, telling her the coffee machine was broken and I tried to fix it with duct tape. A photo booth strip from a county fair, long before she started checking out of our marriage. And then a folded paper. I recognized it instantly, a copy of her vows. Handwritten, tear-stained, real. I didn't forget everything, she whispered. Even when I was lying. Even when I was selfish. I remembered all of it, Curtis. I wish I could say I broke down. That I finally let the emotions spill out and met her in the mess of it all. But I didn't, because I knew what this was. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't an apology. It was a woman trying to claw her way back into a life she'd already lit on fire, and bring souvenirs to make it feel warm again. You brought a shoebox, I said flatly. I brought proof. Lawyers. Consequences. You don't get to fix this with nostalgia. That cracked something in her. She slumped onto the bottom porch step, covered her face with her hands, and for the first time since any of this started, she really cried. Not dramatic crying. Not performative. Just a quiet, jagged, ugly sobbing. The kind that makes the air around you feel like it's holding its breath. And then she said it. Gavin's gone. He told me he was never serious. Said I was just a thrill. He told his wife everything before I even got home. They're getting back together. I lost everything, Curtis. I stood there in silence, letting her words hang in the cold afternoon air. For a second, I wanted to feel satisfaction, vindication, something. But all I felt was this unbearable sadness. Not for her, but for the version of me that once would have jumped to comfort her, no matter what. I don't know why I did it, she said between breaths. I don't even like who I was around him. I felt powerful, desired, important, but I was stupid. So stupid. And the second I saw that photo on the garage door, I knew I'd killed the only real thing I ever had. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to ask if she ever thought about me crying in bed while she was sipping cocktails in another man's arms. If she ever thought about how I still washed her mug every morning even when I knew she wouldn't be back for breakfast. But I didn't. Instead, I asked her the one thing I never had the courage to say before. Did you ever, even once during all of this, think about what it would do to me? She looked up slowly, eyes swollen, lips trembling. Yes, she said. But I convinced myself you were strong, that you'd understand, that you'd wait for me to come to my senses. I didn't think you'd walk away. And that's when I realized the saddest truth of all. She didn't betray me because she stopped loving me. She betrayed me because she thought I'd never leave. She came back from her conference all smiles, until the driveway greeted her with the truth. The silence after her last words hit harder than anything she'd said before. Not because they were particularly profound, but because they were so absurdly, heartbreakingly honest. She thought I'd never leave, as if my loyalty was something she could withdraw against endlessly without ever checking the balance. As if I'd just stand there, arms open, waiting to patch the holes in her life that she carved out herself. I don't remember sitting down, but I found myself slumped against one of the porch beams, elbows on my knees, watching the sun drop lower behind the trees like it was hiding from us too. Eloise was still on the step, head in her hands, her carefully curated composure now fully dismantled. She wasn't here to manipulate me. Not this time. There was no smile, no excuses, no shifting of blame. Just a broken woman facing the aftershock of her own choices. I know I can't fix it, she said eventually, her voice hoarse. But if you'd let me stay for just tonight. Not to talk, not to beg. Just, I don't have anywhere else to go. I should have said no. Every rational part of me screamed that I should. Let her feel what exile really tastes like. Let her stew in the consequences of her carelessness. But I'm not wired that way. I never was. And maybe it was the part of me still mourning the life we had that nodded slowly and said, "You can sleep in the guest room. Nothing more." She gave a hollow thank you, the kind that drips with shame rather than relief. I cooked dinner that night like an idiot. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. She barely touched her plate. We didn't speak much. The air was thick with memories, but none of them were soft. Everything was laced with what-ifs and the ghost of 100 choices that could have saved us but didn't. After dinner, I took a walk around the lake near the cabin. I needed space. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. And when I came back, she was in my room. Not crying. Not snooping. Just sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the shirt I'd worn on our 5th anniversary. The one I didn't know she'd kept. It had been buried in the back of the closet with a few other pieces of our history. Pieces I had assumed were meaningless to her. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, startled. "I'm sorry," she said, flustered. I was curious. I remembered this shirt. You wore it when we danced alone in the kitchen after the power went out. Remember? I didn't respond. That memory hurt now. It used to be warm. Now it felt like a weapon she didn't know she was holding. She moved toward the door, but before leaving, she turned back and asked something that caught me off guard. "Were you ever going to cheat on me, Curtis?" I blinked. "What?" She looked down. "During all those years when we were distant, when I stopped paying attention, when I shut down, did you ever think about it?" I stared at her, then answered with the most painful truth I could give. "No, but I thought about leaving, more than once. I just never believed I deserved better than what you were giving me." She exhaled sharply, like I'd knocked the wind out of her, and walked out of the room without another word. That sentence lingered between us like smoke from a fire that had finally burned itself out. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. Judging by the faint creaking I could hear from the guest room floorboards as she tossed and turned. And sometime around 4:30 a.m., I realized what I had to do next. Not for revenge. Not for closure. But for freedom, the kind that comes when you finally stop bleeding for someone who never once tried to stop the knife. She came back from her conference all smiles, until the driveway greeted her with the truth. The sun hadn't fully risen when I started packing. Not in anger. Not in panic. Just peace. The kind of calm that comes when a wound finally scabs over. When the ache dulls and your body whispers, "It's time." I folded my clothes quietly, loaded up my laptop, tucked Oliver into his carrier, and left a short note on the kitchen counter. Not for Eloise, she'd said enough. It was for me. A reminder I needed to see in my own handwriting. Survival isn't enough. You deserve to live. She was awake when I stepped out of the guest room. Sitting at the small kitchen table, still in the same clothes from yesterday, fingers nervously circling the rim of a chipped coffee mug. We locked eyes for a moment, and I saw something in hers I hadn't seen in years. Not control, not defiance, but humility. "I won't follow you," she said quietly. "I won't beg. I just hope one day I get to forgive myself." I didn't offer comfort. That wasn't my role anymore. But I did give her a nod. A quiet acknowledgement of something broken, but not destroyed. Because the truth is, people don't always get what they deserve. They get what they choose to live with. And I was finally done choosing pain. I drove for 6 hours that day. No GPS. No plan. Just open roads and a strange kind of relief riding shotgun. I ended up in a small town near the coast, checked into a modest bed and breakfast, and for the first time in years, I slept, really slept, without waiting for a phone to buzz or a lie to unravel. In the weeks that followed, things moved fast. Divorce papers were signed. Accounts split. The house sold. I didn't fight for it. That house had walls too full of echoes. Let her fill the silence if she wants. Miranda and I stayed in touch, not romantically, but as survivors of the same storm. We'd meet for coffee sometimes, talk about healing, about trust, about what we'd do differently next time. Turns out, rebuilding isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about discovering what was buried underneath it the entire time. I've started writing again. Not just posts like this, actual stories. Fiction, mostly. It's weird how betrayal can dig up the creative parts of you that grief had smothered. And in all of it, I found something I never expected to. A version of myself that wasn't shaped by who I was trying to be for someone else. So yes, this started with a driveway, a photo, and a lie. But it ended with a door opening somewhere new. To a quiet town, a rented room, and a man finally choosing himself. Thanks for staying with me through this entire journey. If you've ever found yourself in a situation like mine, I hope you know, it's not weakness to walk away. It's strength to stop running in circles and finally walk in a straight line towards something better. Let me ask you this, what's one moment in history, personal or global, that changed everything with a single choice? I'd love to hear your answers in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more real confessions here on Reddit Confessions, where every truth eventually comes to light.